Hello guys, and welcome to Broken Arrow. Today I'm going to be taking you through all of the Russian units available in the November open beta. Please bear in mind what you see is a work in progress and therefore subject to change. I'm going to go through each of the types of units one by one, starting here with the VDV Recon units. So, VDV Razvedka, that's where we're going to be starting today. They are airdroppable. They do have the sprint ability and can drop themselves smoke, which is very nice. It's a 5-man squad and they have decent optics at 1700, RPG 7D3 to defend themselves against light and medium armor. Then we have ourselves the VDV snipers. These guys can come with both a suppressed and a long range loadout. I'm a big fan of the suppressed loadout because it allows them to engage enemy infantry without necessarily revealing their position if your opponent doesn't have adequate recon. These guys have a optics of 2000, which is really good. They have the sprint ability. They don't have smoke, but they can laser designate for your weapons that use laser guidance. Then we have the VDV Spetsnaz. These guys pretty strong against enemy infantry if they're using the thermobaric loadout. Otherwise, they can bring in the RPG 16 if you want to ambush light vehicles, maybe in the back line. Otherwise, though, decent optics again at 2000, 5-man squad, do have smoke, do have the sprint ability, can be airdropped, and can laser designate. So a really nice all-round recon squad. Then we have the Rheostat. Kind of weak armor on this one, can be airdropped though, is amphibious and has laser designating capability. If you upgrade it to the Credo station, it has 2400 optics, which is really nice. Its default is only 2000. Then we have the Sarmat 2. The Sarmat 2, really fast vehicle, can be used to hunt down units in the back line, especially if you give it a decent enough weapon. It starts with the minigun. You can also grab the cord or the grenade launcher, and there's also the option to bring the Metis, although bear in mind that the Metis only has a range of 1200 meters, so most of the things you're going to be engaging this with will be able to fire back at you. But otherwise, 1700 optics is decent for this thing to get around, and yeah, if you give it like a cord, it can go and run down like vehicles in the background. Otherwise, it's airdroppable. Then we have the Typhoon VDV. You get a little bit more armor on this, which is nice, especially against sort of lighter arms fire and enemy 50 cals and such. So it can survive those much better. And it does carry 5 troops. So this is probably going to be the option for bringing in your 5-man squads like the VDV Spetsnaz. Now a nice upgrade for this is the 2A42 autocannon. This can actually rip through light armored vehicles quite nicely. So definitely something to watch out for, especially considering it only costs 60 points. Can be airdropped, does have its own smoke as well, which is super, super helpful. Don't forget about that. Then we have the 4-post, which is a minor drone. Can be added with corner HGMs and also the thermobaric shots as well. But 2000 optics for this is not fantastic, and you're likely going to have to get too close for this to be useful, and then it will get shot down by enemy AA. So bear that in mind, but in situations where there is a lack of enemy AA, these can be super, super useful. Then we have the Orion, which gets much better optics at 4000. Its inner pylons can have a range of weapons, the Vikia HGM, the Cornet HGM. The Vikia with the 1800 meters is nice. Same with the thermobaric with the 1800. Really depends how you want to use them. And then there's also the Cab 50 low drag bomb. You can also do the outer pylons the same. And then its sensors can be upgraded to get the optics up. Now, in my opinion, just keeping it empty with the 4500 optics with the upgraded sensors is probably the way to go. Moving on to the Guards Tank Brigade Recon units, we start with the BRM-3K. A pretty meaty vehicle that can punish infantry very, very quickly if they get caught in the open, but might suffer against enemy armor. It does have 100 front armor, which is okay. It can smoke itself off if it comes under fire as well, and it can laser designate, which is handy. This can be upgraded with the Attacker A to Gem. Now the attack is actually a pretty good HGM with 950 millimeters of heat penetration at 1,800 meters range. So definitely something to consider if you want to bring these along as sort of your dedicated armored recon vehicle. It can also have its armor upgraded so that it can absorb up to 400 millimeters of heat in the front armor and 120 mils of kinetic. Then we have the T90M. This thing is just awesome. Really strong, like recon tanks in this game are really, really good. And they can be upgraded with the cord HMG, which I'd probably recommend because this thing is going to be spotting infantry quite a lot for you with the 1700 optics. And especially if you give it the optronic mask, that goes up to 2000. And having that machine gun is super, super important for cutting down the infantry that you find. So yeah, I would definitely make sure to upgrade this probably with both customization options. But otherwise, really, really strong 800 millimeters of kinetic front armor, 1300 versus heat, and side armor's considerably weaker but still pretty strong. It gets 2 lots of smoke to save itself from sticky situations. Don't forget to use it. Alright, moving on to the Morskaya Razvedka. These are part of the coastal troops, which is one of the new specializations that we get access to in the November open beta. So pretty cool. They come with silenced weapons. Except actually the machine gun's even silenced as well, so that's fantastic. And then you've got the 105 millimeter heat round from the RPG-27. It's a 5-man squad. They get smoke, they can sprint, so kind of effective recon squad. Very effective actually for the price. Then we have the PDSS 60-point squad. Really, really interesting squad this is, because they can be airdropped, but they're also amphibious, so they can swim themselves. They can sprint and they can drop themselves smoke. They're a 4-man squad with the ADS, which is an interesting rifle. It is silenced, so they are able to engage enemy infantry without necessarily revealing themselves. But the main thing that I would say for the PDSS in this game is they're kind of backline recon units. You can kind of sneak them around the waterways and get them into really, really good positions to spot your enemy's backline and what they have coming in to reinforce. Now you can upgrade to the DP-64 grenade launchers, which would make them pretty good to sort of assist your own troops against enemy infantry, but you might as well just keep them on the ADS rifles in my opinion. Really cool loadouts though. Then we have the Spetsnaz VMF. So these have 2 loadouts. They have the assault loadout, which gives them the ADS, which has access to the 40mm grenade launcher, and the bullpup PKP. They also have the SVU AS, which is a nice marksman's rifle. If you go over to fire support, they get access to the ASVK anti-material rifle. So that can be handy, especially against light vehicles. And if you can get these into a good position to make use of this anti-material rifle, they can actually do some decent damage in the backline, but it's never going to be quick enough to kill stuff outright. So do bear that in mind. Like generally, if you start hitting people's stuff in the backline, they notice it, they will have time to run away. So generally, I think the assault option's better. Just keep those silencers on those units and yeah, basically just stay hidden until you need to unleash on your opponent. They can be airdropped, sprint, smoke, and laser designate. Very, very nice. Then we have a really cool unit here. I like how this looks, really well modeled. The 1v14 Machina. This thing is equipped by default with a PKP. It's a 2000 optics amphibious vehicle with laser designator. It can be upgraded on its optics to 2400, which does take away its PKP. But honestly, with the way that you're going to use this, it's kind of one of those vehicles that you might just have sitting in a river or maybe on the side of a map with a bunch of water, kind of protecting your flanks from things that are coming in, or at least not necessarily protecting it, but as an early warning system for you. Then finally, we have the BRDM-2M. By default, this has the KPVT and the PKT. It is amphibious, lightly armored, 1700 optics. Can be upgraded with some pretty nice modules. So it can have the BCAS module, which increases its optics to 2000, which for a 55-point unit is pretty handy, especially considering it's armored. You can also get the cord and the armor grenade launcher there. So pretty cool. That's basically adding a machine gun and a grenade launcher on top. So actually it's changing out the KPVT for the quad, never mind. And then we have the KPVB autocannon and grenade launcher. Really nice loadout. For 60 points, pretty handy to have an autocannon on a high optics vehicle. It's kind of like having the Sarmat with an autocannon or like something on it. But in this case, it's the BRDM, of course. Or sorry, the VDV is what I was thinking of. Yeah, so it's kind of like the coastal equivalent of the VDV's Typhoon, if you put the autocannon on it. Alrighty, let's move on to the infantry. So the VDV, in the infantry tab, they get access to the grenade launcher. This is a 5-man squad with 2 grenade launchers. They can be airdropped and they can sprint, which is nice, so they can get themselves out of sticky situations. Then we have the VDV Douche. These guys are a 5-man squad again. They do have grenade launcher, they have 2 machine guns, and they have the RPG 7VL. The 7VL has a 500mm heat round. It's okay. It's kind of a little bit outmatched by some of the higher armor, but definitely going to be able to take out medium armor and light armor very effectively with these. Can be airdropped, sprint, smoke, 1200 optics on infantry. Then we got the Igla squads. Now, manpads in general in Broken Arrow, I think is super important at the moment, so I would definitely recommend bringing them when you can. In this case, they are a 5-man squad with the AK-74 grenade launcher and a machine gun, so they can actually defend themselves pretty well, whilst also having the Igla D, which has a fire and forget infrared missile. So really, really nice. Can be airdropped and can sprint. You probably want to double these up when you're using them. I like to have them in like squads of 2s, because that way you're more likely to shoot down an enemy helicopter. Like the first missile will get lost by flares, the second will hit, and then 2 more hit, and then you get the kill. That's kind of what you want to do with an Igla, or any manpad for that matter. Now the Cornet squad, really nice for the VDV because they get 2 Cornets in one squad. These are pretty strong ATGMs with a 1000mm of heat penetration, 1600 meter range. You can upgrade it to the Cornet M, which does give them the 1200mm of heat penetration. This is going to be super important against the really heavy American tanks, so bear that in mind. Can be airdropped, do have the sprint to get them out of trouble. Then we have the VDV Metis M. So this is sort of like a fire support squad with the 2 AKs and the PKP plus the Metis. And the Metis, it's kind of a risky ATGM because it's limited range, but the Metis M1, it's got the 1200 meter range with the 900mm of heat, so I think if you're going to use these, it's probably worth upgrading them so that Metis is actually hitting and doing a decent amount of damage. Moving on to the Guards Tank Brigade, you can get another grenade launcher team. This one instead has the AGS-40, which is a slightly upgraded grenade launcher. Can sprint, otherwise that's about it. Then we have the Guards Motostrelki, an 8-man squad with 6 rifles, 2 of which have grenade launchers, and then they have 2 PKPs and the RPG-28. The RPG-28, pretty nasty close-range weapon, 900mm of heat penetration. You don't want to get too close to these bad boys with your armor. Otherwise, these can kind of hold their own against enemy infantry at a distance. Close range, specialist weapons like thermobaric and such will defeat them. Sprint, smoke, pretty decent unit. Then we have the engineers, the storm engineers. These guys are pretty cool. They have either the assault shield loadout, which gives them flashbangs, and flashbangs basically like stun enemy infantry. You've got the shotgun there, you've got some grenade launchers and your AK-12s. They're an 8-man squad, sprint with smoke, or you can go for the RPG, thermobaric RPG with the the TBG-7V, which is probably the better way, I would say, to use these. I think the thermobaric RPG is pretty handy to have, and again, using these in like squads of 2 will allow you to basically overcome any enemy infantry very quickly indeed. Now back to Manpad squads, we have the Verba. The Verba against high altitude units has worse range. Actually, I think it actually has better range. Or is it the same? No, it's actually slightly better than the Igla. Okay. So 2,100 meters versus low altitude, 1,550 meters versus high altitude. Again, double these up. Any manpower squad, just double them up. I really think that's the way to go. Just be careful that once they fly, you move them, because otherwise they're going to become a big target for artillery and such. Especially guided missiles. Chunye, Bretti, these guys are a monster of a squad. 14-man squad with 10 AK-74s, 4 of which have grenade launchers, and they have 4 machine guns and the RPG-27. Now, the RPG-27, not the best of AT weapons, especially for dealing with like heavier armor, but this squad is going to mince enemy regular squads at range. You can also upgrade it to the RPG-28, so I would probably recommend that if you're going to bring them in, although it does make them very expensive at 130 points. So look after them, keep them resupplied where you can, and you're going to be having a fun time with these guys. Then we have the Gonostrauki, the Mountain Boys, AK-74s, 2 grenade launchers between those 5 rifles, and then 2 SVDs with a Metis. It'd be nice if you could upgrade this to the Metis M, but they're just going to be hanging out with the normal Metis. So whilst these guys can engage relatively well at range due to the SVD, unfortunately, like their AT weapon kind of lets them down. But they're only 60 points, so pretty decent to use in groups to take out enemy infantry. Then we have the Moskaya. These chaps are a 7-man squad. 5 of their AKs get 2 grenade launchers, and then they have 2 RPKs in the RPG-27. Again, compared to the RPG-28, the RPG-27 just feels a little lackluster, but still a really nice costed squad at 70 points. Do you have sprint and smoke capability? So did the Gonostrauki. I'm not sure if I pointed that out. Then we move on to the Conkers squad. The Conkers can be upgraded to a Conkers M. The standard Conkers is only 650 millimeters of heat at 1,600 meters, and the Conkers M is 750 millimeters at 1,600 meters. So I think it's worth the 10-point upgrade just to get that extra heat penetration. Definitely helps you do a bit more damage, and they can sprint. Then we have the SPG-9 Sapog. This thing is just the SPG-9M, which is 1,000 meter range. It can engage enemy infantry, so bear that in mind. And it can also engage enemy light vehicles. Pretty decent squad for laying down fire support against enemy infantry, honestly, and enemy light vehicles, but will struggle massively against anything heavier. So bear that in mind. All right, that's the infantry. Let's move on to the vehicles. In the vehicle tab, we have the BMD-2 to begin with as part of the VDV brigade. These can be upgraded quite substantially with the Conkers HGM or the Cornet M. The Cornet M has the 1,200 millimeters of heat penetration at 1,800 meters, and the Conkers is 650 at 1,600. So the BMD-2M upgrade is probably the best bet if you want to upgrade them. Otherwise, it's a decent auto cannon fire support unit that can be airdropped and is amphibious, carries 5 men. Then we have the BMD-4M, which has the 30mm cannon alongside the 100mm gun. This 100mm gun can fire a missile. It has the 1,600 meter Arcan with 750 millimeters of heat penetration. It's slightly better armor than the BMD-2. It can be airdropped. It is still amphibious, and it does have smoke. The only upgrade here is increasing its armor, which if you're going to use it, it's probably worth taking. Extra armor is always a good idea, especially if it increases your kinetic armor as well. I think there are cases where I don't take the armor upgrades because it only upgrades the heat armor, and in most cases that's not going to really make much difference. So onto the BTRD, classic transport with 10 men it can bring. It does have 2 machine guns in the front there. We've got the airdroppable trait, the amphibious trait. It does have smoke. So yeah, standard thing. It can be upgraded to have the cord and grenade launcher. Honestly, if you upgrade it and use it in a fire support role for 55 points, it's really not too bad. Then we have the BTR MDM Rakushka. This thing is a little ugly armored box. It does come with airdroppable and amphibious, but carries 15 men. Can be upgraded to have the ZU-23-2 or the ZU-23-2M. The difference between those, I think, is mainly range. And then we have the Igla upgrade for that as well. So pretty nice transport, honestly, when you give it that upgrade. Like, having extra Iglas is never a bad thing because helicopters are pretty strong. Then there's the BTR RD robot. This is a 7-man transport with the Cornet on top. It can be upgraded to the Cornet M, which has that 1,800 meter range with the 1,200 millimeters of heat. So honestly, as a transport, which also provides you with a decent HGM, is certainly worth considering. Can be airdropped, is amphibious, does have smoke. Then we have the BTR ZD Skrezet, which is the BTR with the Skrezet on top. Can be upgraded again to the ZU-23-2M or the one with the Igla. Probably just want to go all the way, honestly. Make it into a nice AA unit. Or I guess if you want to keep it cheap, for 55 points, having a twin 23 mil is pretty good for dealing extra damage to enemy infantry. So something to bear in mind. But airdrop, trait, yeah, amphibious, smoke. Smoke is something you really need to remember on all of these. Next up, we have the Cornet D1 AT. This has access to the Cornet M with the 1,200 millimeters of heat and 1,800 meter range. You can upgrade it so that it has 4 on each sort of turret or arm, I suppose. That just gives it way more ammo to use. You can see it gets like 12 ammo there instead of just the 8, which is really, really handy. 1,400 optics is not too bad for this as well, so it can kind of spot for itself. Airdroppable, is amphibious, and has smoke. Then we have the Sprut. Now the Sprut actually has a pretty decent gun. 125mm gun, up to 600mm of kinetic penetration, and 125mm of heat penetration. This can really do some serious damage to enemy armored vehicles that don't have much kinetic protection. So it's fantastic for getting into the backline if you can, airdropping them into positions where enemy armor might not be present, and you can just go around destroying everything that's like lightly armored. They do also get the Invar 750mm, 1,600 meter range missile, which is pretty handy. And then in terms of customization options, they can be upgraded to the SDM. The SDM increases their optics and it increases the gun so that it's got extra penetration, and then you can also add on more armor as well, which potentially is worth it, although you're only increasing from 80 to 100 kinetic frontal armor and only 30 to 40 side armor. Against anything like heat wise, 200 and 140 is not going to be like crazy helpful on the protection, although it will certainly help you take less damage. It's not going to like prevent things from doing damage to you, if you see what I mean. So potentially very helpful, but actually you do lose the option to airdrop it if you add the extra armor on it. All right, moving on to the Guards Tank Brigade. We have the B10. This thing can actually be a right menace because it's an extremely well armored transport. It has it can carry 8 men, but it's got 120 millimeters of frontal armor, 100 millimeters of side armor. Really, really tanky beast for 45 points. Amphibious, does have its own smoke, and then you can upgrade it with some pretty nice modules. So we have the Boomerang module, which gives it a 30mm auto cannon and access to the Cornet M, which is a really nasty HGM that I've pointed out multiple times already. Or you can go for the Avoca module, which also adds the Bulat, which is a really interesting weapon system. 300mm of heat penetration, 1,100 meter range, can target both infantry and vehicles with that. So yeah, you're going to be able to put down a lot of DPS if you fully upgrade these. Then you can furthermore go even bigger with the Afghanet active protection. So then you're able to protect yourself against incoming missiles as well. And that gives you 4 active protection system charges. You got the smoke, you got the amphibious trait. Yeah, this thing can be an absolute monster if you make it one. Although it does cost a lot, do bear that in mind. But yeah, BMOT, going to be the next one. Interesting vehicle, this one. Can carry 8 men. It is not amphibious or anything, it just has 2 smoke charges, which is actually pretty nice for an armored vehicle, or for a transport vehicle, I should say. You can give it additional explosive reactive armor. Probably not worth it even for 5 points, because it only increases the explosive reactive armor on the sides. And then the engine upgrade really depends like what situation you're going to be using it in. Like if this is like a primary transport for you, then yeah, you might want to upgrade the engine so it goes a bit faster. But otherwise, like it's only a difference of like 10 speed. So you might want to just keep this standard if you're planning to use it. Then we have the BMPT Terminator 2. What a beast this is. 700 millimeters of frontal armor, 1200 millimeters of heat. Absolutely crazy stats there, with a twin 30mm autocannon. It's got the PKT, it's got the attacker, ATGMs, 950 millimeters of heat penetration at 1800 meter range. Not the best penetration if you compare it to something like the Corner M, but you can give it even more firepower if you want, in the form of the 2 AG-17 grenade launchers. And you can also give it additional explosive reactive armor, but again, that's only affecting the sides. So generally when I'd use a Terminator 2, I probably wouldn't upgrade it. I don't think it's really worth it. Like if you're playing correctly, side armor should never really be exposed. So that's kind of the way I see it. All right, let's move on to the 9P162 Cornet T. The Cornet T, it has access to the standard Cornet, 1000 millimeters of penetration, 1600 meters. It can be upgraded to the Chrysanthema. This thing is 1100 millimeters of heat penetration, 1700. So slightly worse than the Cornet M, but can be launched at infantry, it seems. So interesting one there. Seems like this one can also target infantry with 4 of its missiles. Something to bear in mind. And then we have the ability to up armor it, which might be worth doing in this case because it does increase the front armor quite substantially, especially if you're going against other ATGM vehicles with it, and also like tanks. That extra 20 millimeters of kinetic frontal armor on top is kind of nice. Then we have the big bad boy. This is the T14 Armata, 125 millimeter gun with 800 millimeters of kinetic penetration at 1,400 meters. Decent HE capabilities. Does have a heat round as well, which has 850 millimeters of heat penetration, and then it's also got the Sprinter ATGM, which has a range of 1,800 meters, 850 millimeter heat. Now you can upgrade that to the Sokol V top attack missile. So, you know, if you're up against the heaviest of targets, this is the way to go. Make sure that you can penetrate that top armor of something like an M3 or like an M1A3. Then we have the PKT cord, and you can also upgrade the armor on this if you want to increase your kinetic side armor and your heat front armor. For the most part, HGMs aren't really going to be your worst enemy because you do have active protection and you have smoke, so the extra armor on the front is not going to help you all that much. You're already going to be tanking a lot of the damage. But maybe getting the top attack missile for engagements against enemy heavy tanks could be really handy. T15 Barbarous, going to be the next big bad boy of the Russian armor. Comes with the big Barbarous turret on it with the 30mm and the Cornet M's. You can upgrade to the Kinzhal module, which has a 57mm gun, 240mm of kinetic penetration on that bad boy, and also of course can fire at like helicopters and infantry, and then gets the attacker ATGM. And the attacker is kind of nice. I think it's potentially faster than the Cornet in terms of speed. Max speed is 200. Yeah, the attack is much faster. So good for picking off units quickly. I actually kind of prefer the Boomerang module generally than this module, just because it makes it so expensive. I mean, it's already an expensive unit, I suppose, so maybe it doesn't really matter. But it is an 8-man transport, and that's what you'll be using it for. That's how you get it. It will be a transport option. And then we have the T80U. Over 200 points, the T80U gives you 650 millimeters of frontal armor and the 1000 heat protection. It has 2 smokes. Its penetration is 560 millimeters of kinetic penetration at 1,300 meters. And it can use the Invar missile. You can upgrade it quite a lot. So in this case, the T80UM increases the armor on the front and also the optics. It changes the Invar as well to a slightly better variant with extra heat penetration. And there's the UM2, which gets access to active protection, as well as, oh, okay, so that's instead of the upgraded Invar, you get the worse Invar, and you get 1 less machine gun, and you don't get the optics package. So I'm not particularly sure if I'm a massive fan of the T80UM2, although having active protection is very, very nice. And then there's the T80UA, which has the 30% electronic countermeasures. So this basically takes 30% off the accuracy of anything flying towards it, I'm pretty sure, especially like against like missiles and such. It does get the increased armor. You got the smoke, and you have the upgraded gun as well, by the looks of things. So 640 millimeters of kinetic penetration. The rest of them all have the Vant. All right, well, in my opinion, I think the T80UM standard upgrade is fine in the situations you're going to be using it. Then we have the T90, and the T90 is slightly less frontal armor, doesn't have has the electronic countermeasure by default, which is pretty handy. And then its gun, it's slightly worse. I mean, we got 520 millimeters of kinetic penetration here, but it's still pretty decent. And you still have the Invar. So for 170 points, I think this is a really good value unit. You can upgrade it to the 2006 variant. That will increase the AP on the gun. The penetration goes up to 640 millimeters of kinetic penetration, and you get an increased front armor package as well there, as well as extra optics. Quite a nice modernization package, but I think the 170 point variant is a really, really cost efficient tank to use. Then we have the T90M. Does have that upgraded gun, 720 millimeters of kinetic penetration. It has the heat round there and the HE round. And then we've also got the upgraded Invar. There is the ability to add a cord HMG instead of the PKT. And then you can upgrade its armor and give it the potential to have active protection. So you can either increase the side armor, which again, I don't think is really worth it, generally speaking. You've got the active protection system there. And then you've got active protection plus explosive reactive armor. I think generally just having arena is fine if you're going to use it. And generally, like if you're going to go for a tank like this, like upgrading them is definitely worth it. Finally, we have the coastal troops armored units, starting with the BMOP Toros Rapira. Really interesting vehicle, this one, with the Rapira gun on it. Amphibious. I wouldn't want to fire this on the water, that's for sure. But 1,200 optics. Now you can upgrade it from the AT gun to a 57mm AA piece. It does have the HE shot against helicopters, but that is limited to 1,100 meters. Then there's the 2A42 with the grenade launcher. So there's a 30mm autocannon. And then there's the 2A72, which is the upgraded 30mm with the Cornet ATGM. So quite a nice loadout. Interesting vehicle. not particularly fast, but honestly not that slow either. I mean, 65 forward speed is actually not too bad. And you can up armor it, but that's only going to be affecting the side armor. Very interesting unit. Then we have the BMP-3F, amphibious BMP-3 with smoke. This has a 100mm gun, of course, alongside its 30mm, and then uses the Arcan. Can the Arcan be upgraded? We've got the Sudama with the Vishna. That's going to have slightly more range and the upgraded missile. For 10 points, probably worth it. Really like the extra details on these for sure. Right, then we have the 9P148 Conkers. It's just a kind of standard BRDM basically, with either the Conkers HGM, which is a Conkers M, or the Cornet. The Cornet is definitely better with the 1000mm of heat penetration. For 70 points, keep these hidden away. Maybe they can catch out enemy vehicles quite nicely. 1400 optics on them, can kind of spot for themselves. BT-3F, big chunky transport, can be added with a 23mm autocannon. Its armor has explosive reactive armor package, which is potentially worth it. Depends what you're bringing in these. Like if the Chenya are coming in these, I would definitely go for the explosive reactive armor package because you don't want to lose that squad in the transport. So yeah, definitely something to consider. It does have smoke, is amphibious. This is the same, smoke and amphibious, BTR-80. Pretty standard vehicle that a lot of people will already know about. 8 people can be transported, can have the 2A72 autocannon, which actually makes this into a bit of a beast because at 80 speed, it's going to be able to do a decent job. And you can also add the grenade launcher on top of that if you want extra infantry shredding capability. But I think just the autocannon's fine so that you can keep your range with this. And you can increase the armor quite substantially for 5 points. That's doubling the front armor and giving you massive heat protection. So that would be well worth it. That is probably how you want to bring it in. Then there's the BTR-90, which comes by default with the 30mm autocannon and the Conkers M. You can upgrade it to have the Rostock turret, which basically just gives it the grenade launcher by the looks of things. Then there's the Bakcha turret, which has the 100mm alongside the 30mm, and then the Arcan. And then there's the Berezok turret, which has the Conkers. For 100 points, getting a Cornet, sorry, is pretty nice. It's got decent anti-infantry capability as well. A substantial upgrade. I think for 70 points, the BTR-90 without upgrades is actually pretty good value. PT-76, this little 30-point bad boy. This is a lackluster vehicle. Front arm is okay, like nothing to write home about. Weapon package is kind of terrible though. 76mm gun, 150mm of heat. Can be upgraded to have either the 2A42 autocannon with the grenade launcher, which is actually a pretty nice upgrade, and then there's also the 57mm autocannon upgrade, which does have 240mm of kinetic penetration. That's actually a pretty nice weapon, but I'm not sure I'd want it on that hull. This, however, is definitely a sensible upgrade. You can up armor the sides, probably not worth it, and you can upgrade the engine if you don't want it to be so slow, because it is very slow otherwise. Finally, we have the T-80BV with all its explosive reactive armor all over it. Active smoke, 2 charges of course, like most tanks. Has 520mm of kinetic and 500mm of heat penetration. If you modernize it, it looks like you're getting a better gun, one that can actually fire ATGMs. You're getting a better armor package. You're also probably getting better optics as well, yeah, for sure. This one's going to be giving you better rear armor and more health. And then finally, better side armor and more health. Okay. Personally, I think the 2017 is good enough. Just get that extra gun. I mean, even without it, like 150 points for this is a good value, kind of like the T90. I kind of like to have a mix of like super high level tanks like the Armata and the T90M Arena, and then some cheap variants like the standard T90 and the T80BB. Alright, moving on to support. VDV is pretty easy in this one. We've got the Durok. This is a small mortar carrier. 82mm mortars. Air droppable. Active smokes. 1200 optics. Not too great. You can put these mostly smoke or mostly HE. You probably want mostly smoke if you're going to use this, because that's what it would be used for. Just smoking your infantry forwards to make sure they don't get hit as they're running building to building. Then we have the Nonna, which has the 120mm, which is a little bit more sizable and good for taking on enemy armor targets a little bit better. Again, weapon package here, you can get laser guided bomb variant, or not laser guided bombs, but laser guided variant. So if you have like a laser guided Recon infantry or something, you can make these hit very effectively. And that is going to make it cost an extra 25 points. And the laser guided variant of these could probably do a decent chunk of damage. Then we have the Kamaz VDB, which is a 2000 supply truck. Not really much more to be said there. Then we have the Muster. Big 152mm HE gun with a range of 3,800 meters. It does have itself some laser guided munitions. This is where the laser guided capability of the Recon tab is kind of important. There's also the upgrade, which reduces the reload time significantly. Then we have the 2S31 Vina. Another 120mm mortar platform. You can change it so that it does have the laser guided ability, and it takes away the direct fire capability of the unit. Then there's the Koalitzaya. Sorry if I'm butchering these names. 152mm gun with really decent rate of fire. Like if you compare this to the Muster, even the upgraded Muster, the upgraded Muster is 5 to 7 second reload time, 10 to 12 second aim time. The aim time's the same, but the reload time is 4 to 5 seconds. That's really, really good. So, solid artillery weapon. You can have high explosive rounds, you can have cluster rounds, and you can have extended range, which gives you access to the laser guided munitions. Then we have the Derevatsaya. This is pretty nice AA unit with the 57. 1,900 meter range against both low and high altitude targets. Can upgrade it so that it has Susna missiles instead of the turret. But the nice thing I like about the Derevatsaya is it can provide support against enemy infantry quite nicely, as well as targeting helicopters and such. Whereas the Susna missile variant, whilst it does have a pretty decent air, like anti-air missile at 2,400 meters versus like low flying targets, honestly, I think like the autocannon is just more like oppressive, especially if you're like moving it amongst cover. And then there's the Ante, classic big missile boy with the 4,000 meter range missiles. These are gladiator missiles, or you can get giant missiles. Giant missiles have better range, but they take ages to resupply. So do bear that in mind. I think the gladiator missiles generally is the better bet, because you have more of them. You can intercept more enemy missiles with these and shoot down more planes. Like if multiple planes come in at the same time, it's going to give you more shots. Just bear in mind that it is radar. It is therefore going to be targeted by seed. Then we have ourselves the Tor. The Tor is pretty nice because I believe It can fire without its radar on as well. Not entirely sure if that's the case. I'm pretty sure it can, but it has to be obviously closer than if it has its radar on. When it has its radar on, I think the Toro is like pretty good, just because of like how much it can fire. It can multi-target as well. You can see it can have 2 targets. So really solid weapon with 8 magazine size. Just bear in mind again, it is vulnerable to seed. You can upgrade it to have 16 missiles instead of just 8, but I think 8's fine. Just keep supply near it, or send it back to supply. You never really want to keep supply next to units where they are on the front line. You kind of want to make sure that you have them drive back to supply, so they're not in risk of being spotted, because people targeting supply dumps is something that's quite common. Buratino, your classic thermobaric, nasty piece of work. 220mm thermobaric at 1,500 meter range. The range on this is very limited. Does mean that it's probably going to get spotted before it fires a lot of the time. You can upgrade it to the TOS 1A, which has the extra range, 2,400 meter range, which is certainly handy and probably worth doing if you're going to use it, because those missiles are, or rockets I should say, probably pretty good. You can also upgrade the armor, although that's not really worth it because you shouldn't be getting it shot at in the first place. Moving on to the coastal troops. We've got some really interesting ones in the coastal troops. We've got the Gwozdika, which is pretty standard, 122mm howitzer. Can be upgraded to the Hosta, which has the 120mm gun. And then it also has the 300 meter range laser guided munitions. Is amphibious and has smoke. Then we have the Nonna on wheels instead of tracks. Basically the same. You can get the laser guided munitions. You can upgrade it with cage armor if it's getting too close to the front line, but something you're probably not going to need to do. Then we have the 2S39 Magnolia, sort of a towed mortar system with those laser guided munitions. So you get 15 of those laser guided munitions, which is actually pretty good. And you can change it to cluster rounds as well. 120mm cluster with guided munitions as well. That's actually a really nice combination, but obviously kind of a slow unit. So yeah, be careful with that. Then we have the Iskander. And this is where we're starting to get into ballistic missiles. So we got the 9M723 Iskander M. We can upgrade to cruise missiles. Or we can just switch to cruise missiles, sorry. So the difference between ballistic and cruise is ballistic ignore 50% cover. And cruise missiles have a slightly higher dispersion. They also have more range, so 10,000 meter range there. Ballistic missile, 8,000 meter range. You can also get 4 cruise missiles instead of just 2 if you want, but I don't think it's necessarily needed. You fire the 2, you go reload, and then there's no point paying that extra 75 points there. Another interesting unit, the A222 Bereg. This thing is actually really cool. So you can have it as either a howitzer, or you can give it anti-air rounds. Now, anti-air can target helicopters at 2,400 meters. It's pretty effective, to be honest. But the mixed loadout's probably going to be your best bet, so you can use it as artillery or AA when needed. But just using it as a howitzer at 3,800 meters is still good. Then there's the Tor that's being towed, so same as the standard Tor. You can upgrade it to the Panzer instead if you like. The Panzer, pretty strong missiles, 2,400 meter range. High altitude is only 1,800 meters. Is a radar unit. Got to be careful of that against seed. Then there's the supply variant, which does have 30,000 supply capability. That's huge. You make massive supply dumps with this thing. It is also amphibious. Then there's the Vityaz, which is a really nice anti-air weapon just because of the sheer amount of missiles it carries that have seriously long range. 3,200 meter range. I mean, it's not like the craziest range compared to something like a Iskander or like a an Ante, but the 3,200 and 3,600 is more than enough. And I think upgrading these to have like the 3,600 meter range munitions with 12 of those is really, really strong. So yeah, fantastic for engaging enemy missiles and enemy aircraft. This is going to be like your main anti-ballistic missile defense if you're using the coastal troop specialization. Then we have the Borusa. The Borusa going to be decent against enemy infantry and also enemy helicopters if it can get close enough. You can just have it standard with the Credo station, which gives it the 1700 optics, which makes it kind of a recon vehicle that can rip infantry to pieces. Or you can upgrade it to have radar. Radar's going to have like the ability to shoot down the missiles there. And then we've also got the Igla S capable as well. So if you want like some short range missiles as well. Alrighty, moving on to the helicopters. So of course the armored units don't have any helicopters, so we'll just start here with the VDV. There is the Alligator, has access to S8 rockets, S13 rockets or gun pods, can use Attacker HGMs or Vickers HGMs, and then it's also got the ability to bring some Igla S anti-aircraft capability as well if you want to. But bear in mind, if you do put like HGMs and Igla and then also have like rockets and such, it's going to be an expensive helicopter, but it's still a very capable helicopter. Then there's the Mi-24PN, can transport infantry, but otherwise S8 rockets, S13 rockets, gun pods. S13 rockets, by the way, are 130mm rockets, and S8 rockets are 80mm rockets. Bigger does more HE damage basically, but you get less of them. Then you can just add more rockets on the port side pylon or the starboard pylon. You can add some missiles, so you can add Cocon anti-tank missiles or Cocon AT missiles. Well, actually that's just the same thing, but there's just 4 or 8. So there you go. It does have the 10% ECM and also has flares. Then we have the Mi-26, massive cargo helicopter, 85 men it can transport with 20,000 supply. We have the Mi-28. The Mi-28 has some interesting loadouts. It can carry these LMUR HE missiles, which can target sort of enemy infantry, as well as like armor, and it's top-down attack. Or you can have it with just like some rockets here maybe, and then your classic like Vickers HGMs plus Iglas, or just standard Vickers loadout, or just AA loadout, and so on. Really nice loadouts actually for the Mi-28. And it does have 2,400 optics, so can spot for itself very well. I mean, so can the Ka-52 with the 2,400. Mi-35, also an option. Doesn't have as good optics, does have the ECM and flares though. Can carry some soldiers. So it can either have S8 rockets, gun pods, or S13 rockets. It can carry some anti-aircraft, and it can also carry plenty of HGMs if you want it to. You can also add the Vitebsk jamming system, which increases its ECM to 25%. Then there's the Mi-8 AM Tush. This thing is just a troop carrier mostly. 21 seat count, 3,000 supply, but you can give it quite a lot of armament. You can stick loads of rockets on it, as well as Cocon anti-tank missiles, and also Iglas. You can load this thing out quite nicely, as well as having it be a transport. Then there's the Mi-8 MTV 5 Zeleny. This thing is, again, just another transport helicopter with the same sort of loadout. 21 soldiers, but 4,000 supply, and then obviously less pylons, so it can't really have too much on here. Actually, I say less pylons. I think it's more or less the same pylons, just not really got the weapon set up. All right, onto the coastal troops, the Ka-29. Its whole weapon can be an auto cannon. Where is that auto cannon? It's on the side there. Then we've got the 2 gun pods, or the rockets, and then there's also the ability to add ATGMs onto the Ka-52, which is interesting. But this thing, I don't think is too fast compared to some of the other helicopters. So it's going to be difficult to make good use out of ATGMs on it, but in a pinch, you know, if this is your transport, then maybe you'll want to arm it with some ATGMs for those sticky situations. And there's the Ka-52 Katran. This can have rockets on its center pylons, and it can have some very interesting weapons on its outer pylons. So we can actually get cruise missiles on here. 6,000 meter range cruise missiles. Very, very difficult to counter. And there's also KH-31 anti-radiation missiles. So this is SEED at 3,500 meters range. Again, very difficult to counter, because you're going to have these hover so far back and then just like kind of snipe AA weapons that have their radar on. You will kind of have to be careful, because most radar AA is actually like really long range in this game. So they're going to be quite far back, and the thing that's going to be your primary concern for helicopters is usually infrared or like direct fire. So I don't think anti-radiation necessarily on helicopters is the best bet, but being able to like freely fire cruise missiles from quite far away on a helicopter is kind of nice. Otherwise, you've got your standard loadouts of ATGMs. Now this is a 2,000 meter range top attack ATGM, or we can just get your standard attackers out. All right, finally the Mi-38T, 7,000 supply, 30 soldiers it can carry, 10% ECM. And flares, of course. Very cool. All right, moving on to air. Once again, the armored specialization doesn't have any aircraft. So when you're making your decks, you will restrict what aircraft you have between both the VDB and coastal troops. Generally speaking, when it comes to making a division, I think having the armored in there is very important for like random games, like if you're queuing solo. But if you're playing as a team, having someone like specialized into aircraft by taking both the VDB and coastal is kind of a nice choice. But of course, first of all, we have the IL-72MD. Saw so many of these get shot down in the previous beta. 48,000 supply it can bring. Seat count is 125. Does have a twin 23 mil to defend itself. Not going to do too much of a good job with that though. Regardless, decent big transport. Then we have the MiG-35. The MiG-35 inner pylons, you can have KH-38 air-to-ground missiles. There's KH-58 anti-radiation seed missiles. PK-500 smart cluster bombs, and cab smart bombs as well, the laser guided bombs. Or you can just have fuel tanks to allow it to hang around a bit longer, maybe even a fuel tank with some R-77 air-to-air missiles, which have a 6,000 meter range. Then we have on the middle pylons, you can have more KH-38s, more anti-radiation, more smart bombs, or more AA. And then finally on the outer pylons, you have to choose something air-to-air. So it's either R-73s and R-77s. R-77s are your long-range guidance missiles, and then R-73s are your fire and forget infrareds. You can have 4 of the R-77s, 4 of the R-73s, or 2 of each instead as well. Now, making sure that you, like, if you're going to put R-77s on the inner or middle pylons, put 4 R-73s on the outer pylons, because honestly, generally speaking, short range infrared missiles are going to be more useful against helicopters, because you can't target helicopters, I believe, with the R-77. Yeah. And your targets for these after engaging enemy aircraft are going to be helicopters. Right, we've got the Su-30SM. This has the ability to bring in the KH-29 cruise missile. Not a very long range cruise missile at 4,000 meter range. There's the CAB 1500, really solid bomb. You can either have 4 R-77s or R-27ER semi-active missiles. So these are 500 or 5,000 meter range semi-active, as opposed to terminal guidance 6,000 meter. On the inner pylons, you can bring in KH-59 cruise missiles. These have a range of 6,000 meters. They are top attack cluster munitions, good for taking out enemy tanks. You've got 2 CAB 1500s, the KH-29TD again, R-37s, which are really long range air-to-air missiles, 8,000 meter range on those, and then the R-77, and then the R-27ER. Middle pylons, again more KH-59s, 29 TDs, R-27s of all kinds, as well as the R-73s, and then outer pylons, you want more R-73s really. These shorter range missiles. ECM pod, kind of important. 15% ECM is really, really useful. Helps these aircraft survive a lot better against incoming missiles. So yeah, really, really solid plane. My favorite plane of the previous beta, the Su-34. There's a really, really nice loadout for this, where you bring like a 1,500 CAB smart bomb, you put some anti-radiation missiles on it, and then you just load it up with AA. And it's super, super good because it can engage enemy aircraft. It can take out its AA counter and then also unleash a 1,500 kilogram bomb on whatever unlucky target is left in its line of sight. So really nice loadout for the Su-34. But yeah, in terms of loadout, 500 kilogram smart bombs, KH-38 air-to-ground missiles, 250 kilogram dumb bombs. You got 500 kilogram thermobarics, 500 kilogram clusters, incendiary, and also the 500 kilogram. These are just more dumb bombs, I think. Yeah. Then we've got more smart bombs, more anti-radiation, the KH-38 air-to-ground, more Fab 250s, 500 kilogram thermobarics, cluster bombs, incendiary, and more of the Fab 500 SHLs. Then we got more KH-38s. I mean, you can just see how much is in here. On the middle and outer pylons, generally that's where you're going to find your air-to-air, so R-77s and then R-73s are your options with ECM pods again. You can also just do like ECM pod on the outer with a couple of R-77s just for the cheap option, or you can even go like something like this and just have like a dedicated air-to-air as well. There might be situations where you don't need this for air-to-air, right? You just bring it in like so. For 350 points, it's pretty good value. Then the Su-35, this is specialized for air-to-air. So you've got options for the R-37 or R-77s with fuel tanks or not. And then it's basically a mix of all of those different weapons on each of the pylons, as well as the potential for ECM. You can load this out with a lot of missiles if you want to. Like if I choose like 4 R-73s here, we do like 4 R-77s, and then we do, say, another 6 R-77s. You can just launch 10 R-77s downrange very quickly indeed. Then there's the Su-57. The Su-57 can be loaded up with some 6,000 meter range cruise missiles. It does have access to smart cluster and smart HE bombs. It can use anti-radiation. It does have air-to-ground direct fire missiles, and then long-range missiles and mid-range missiles. Same deal for the rear bay. So more or less the same missiles on both sides. I think the Su-57 actually kind of a nice anti-radiation aircraft, just because of its high ECM, and so I think it's a bit more difficult to spot. I mean, it is technically supposed to be a stealth fighter, right? Now we have the Tu-160. So this is where the nuclear comes into play. The KH-102 nuclear cruise missile. This has a range of 10,000 meters, but it makes the Tu-160 cost 1,000 points. So make sure you're getting your value out of this if you're going to ever bring it in, and don't get it shot down. Then there's the option to bring in the 12 KH-101 10,000 meter range standard cruise missiles, more cluster equivalent. Then there's the 14 CAB 1,500 kilogram bombs. I really like this loadout personally. The two 9,000 kilogram bombs, 14 1,500 kilogram bombs, and 44 thermobaric bombs. Yeah, my favorite loadout's probably cabs from the previous beta, but now we have nuclear. Who knows? Moving on to coastal troops. Really interesting AN-72P. This can be equipped with gun pods and rockets. So if you want it to strafe, then why not? But otherwise, pretty thick amount of weight that it can lift, as well as the 52 seats there. Then there's the MiG-29K. MiG-29K inner pylons is KH-35 air-to-ground missile, or any form of air-to-air, so R-77, R-27s, or fuel tanks. Middle pylon is, again, air-to-ground KH-35s, or either the R-77 or R-73. And then the outer pylons, again, an assortment of air-to-air, so primarily an air-to-air fighter. Then we have the Su-33, which gets access to bunch of different bombs: 500 kilogram, 250 kilogram, 100 kilogram, R-27s. It's got again all of those options for bombs plus rockets. S-25, S-13, S-8 rockets with R-27s on the middle pylons as well if you want. ECM pod, always a good choice, plus either 100 kilogram bombs or R-73s. Really solid mid-range air-to-air fighter. Can bring ordnance if you need it. Then there's the Tu-142. The Tu-142, pretty slow aircraft, but can bring quite a lot of ordnance in the form of 8 cruise missiles. These have 10,000 meter range, so you just kind of hang around at the back line and fire these off. And then you can bring in a 3,000 kilogram bomb or 6 1,500s, but I just don't think it's worth it. And then there's the 32 1,000 or 250 kilogram bombs as well. I mean, honestly, it might be okay in situations where there's like no AA, but otherwise we're just going to get shot down. So cruise missiles it probably is for the Tu-142. And then the Tu-22 has some very nice missiles. It has the ability to bring in the kitchen, the 10,000 meter range KH-32. Also access to 8 1,500 kilogram smart bombs, 3,000 kilogram dumb bombs, and there's a fab there, fab 500, so you got 250 kilogram cluster. Under the fuselage you can bring in more 250s, and then there's even more cruise missiles here as well. So you can do like the triple KH-23 loadout, which is pretty nasty indeed. For 400 points is actually really good value. So that's something to consider. But also having 8 1,500 kilogram smart bombs plus the cruiser missiles could also be something nice. Moving on to the Yak-38. Access to 250 kilogram bombs and 100 kilogram bombs. R-60 short range AA. And then also rockets and incendiary and thermobaric. This is a cool little aircraft, but its loadout is certainly limited by the fact that it's generally launched off a carrier. So there you go, the Yak-38, and that is every single unit. And if you want to go back and pause and check out all of their other stats, then feel free to do so. But that is going to be my overview of the Russian units. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed a look at all of those. Let me know what you think of the Russian units in the November open beta. What is here, what is not, what would you like to see moving forwards? But that is it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.